Hey everybody, Michael Simpkins here. Welcome to episode 4 of the Police Instructors Podcast. Thanks again for joining me today. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. And in this episode, I'm speaking with Darren Dake, the founder and COO of the Death Investigation Training Academy out of Cuba, Missouri.
Bringing police instructors together, discussing training trends and more. Welcome to the Police Instructors Podcast, where industry training experts share their strategies on how to plan, develop, and design courses in a way that facilitates training retention. Bringing his 23 years of expertise as a police instructor to you, please welcome your host, Michael Simpkins.
Darren is a certified instructor and criminal investigator with over 30 years' experience in the field of law enforcement and death investigations. He holds certification as an instructor for the Missouri Department of Public Safety, the Missouri Sheriff's Association, and the Law Enforcement Training Institute out of Missouri University, Columbia. Darren is founding director and lead instructor for the Death Investigation Training Academy and publisher of the Coroner Talk Podcast and the Death Investigator Magazine. Make sure you pay attention because Darren has some good strategies to share with us that can help us in planning, developing, and implementing our courses. Pay attention all the way through, and I'll meet up with you at the end. Thank you for being here with me today, Darren. I'm extremely excited you're here. Welcome to the Police Instructors Podcast.
Mike, I'm happy to be here. I was excited when you reached out to me and I found out that this podcast exists and who it's for. I think it's fantastic and something that, as you know, because you started it, didn't exist. And I'm glad you're fulfilling that role. So I'm happy to be here and have to help.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Do you want to take a couple of seconds to introduce the listeners to who you are and a little bit about the businesses that you run?
Yeah, so I'm an old cop. Been at this 30-some years. And the last several years, I've been teaching death investigation because I work on the coroner side and on the police side. So the last several years, I've been heavily in the coroner side. I teach medical legal death investigation, surface buried body recovery, everything to do with death investigation. And over the years, I've just found that there's a gap in good death investigation training, so I've started fulfilling that. We have a podcast, Coroner Talk Podcast, and of course, I'm also the producer of the Death Investigator Magazine. Of course, I have a team behind that, but I'm the producer of Death Investigator Magazine. So everything I do these days has to do with death, and so I guess that does make me a little morbid, but I train police officers, coroners, and medical examiners in that, and we train literally all over the world. We've trained South Korea, we've trained Virgin Islands, we've trained people in Europe. So it's an exciting time. It really is.
So where is it that the listeners could go to find you on the web?
So I think the easiest one, since we're on a podcast here, the easiest thing for your listeners to do is to go to Coroner Talk Podcast or coronertalk.com. And then from there, you can find our magazine. You can link back to our training academy, all of that. But our podcast is Coroner Talk. So go to coronertalk.com and you can find me and everything about our cat.
Awesome, man. I really appreciate you being here. So let's go ahead and get started into our discussion with the first set of questions. The first question is there a secret or a technique you can share with our listeners that helps you think outside of the box when planning and developing your learning content?
Okay, so I think one of the biggest things to help us think outside the box as instructors is, number one, is to listen to your students. Ask the students for feedback, ask them in classes, things like that, because they're going to tell you what they need, even if you're not thinking it. Sometimes us as instructors think we know what students want, but asking them helps us think outside the box. Another thing I do is case reviews. If I can review cases from other states and things where there's been some oddities come up, that helps me determine how best I want to train students, because if this happens somewhere else, it's going to happen again. And then I think that's probably the things that we do is ask the students and review old cases. That keeps our mind fresh, and it's not just doing the same old thing over and over again. because times change. I'm not doing police work today like I did when I started in the late 80s.
Yeah, I don't think none of us are, you know. Now, in the case review, is that like a student review where they actually kind of sit down and maybe review the training, or is that specific cases that you guys are looking at and talking about?
It's actual cases. So one of the things that I do with students is I just get their feedback on training, what would they like to see, and different things like that they're missing. But then on case reviews, I actually search out and look for maybe cold cases that's been solved, or I look for sometimes we get departments and individuals sending us cases to review. Sometimes I get parents that don't agree with their, somebody in Kentucky's died of an overdose. The mom don't agree, and they want us to review the case. Well, what that gives me is all this information, whatever, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, wherever, where 99.9% of the time, the investigators didn't do anything wrong. But it sheds light into how other people are doing things and why this family is upset. Well, now I know how to train better for another family, something like that. And then if I do have a police organization sending me information, which we do, and they want us to weigh in on stuff, and then I can see their shortfalls because they're admitting we have a shortfall. We don't understand some of this stuff. What can you tell me? Well, then that tells me, hey, if this state or this county had this, others will too. And that helps us guide our training to keep it relevant to what's going on today. I mean, we're teaching about opioid death, but we didn't teach about opioid death a few years ago. So now we have what we're doing to fit what's going on.
Unfortunately, I think that is a problem across the country, the opioid epidemic. And I didn't think about that. You guys in the death investigation industry, for lack of a better term, probably seeing a lot of those types of deaths. So what is one of your daily habits you strongly believe contributes to your success?
So for me, of course, some of this is daily and some of it's just regularly. For me personally, and if you ever listen to my podcast, it'll come as no surprise that I am decidedly a Christian. And so one of the things that for me every morning is I like to drink my coffee. I read my portion of the Bible for that day. I may, what somebody else call meditate. I may call prayer, but I get my morning started off in that way so that I have a positive. If I flipped on Facebook first thing in the morning and seen all the negative on Facebook, that would start my day, right? So for me, cup of coffee, nobody else is up, kind of a quiet house, me and the dog sits there, and I'm good. And then other than that, I stay away from the news as much as I can. I stay away from the negative. If I'm going to read a book, it's generally a business book or a positive thinking type book or some type of along those lines. So that keeps me kind of motivated and going the right direction. Can I stay away from the negative altogether? No, because I work in it. But when I can, I try to put my mind into positive things. I got enough negative at work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The last couple of episodes, we talked about mindset, and what you just said kind of really falls into that. It's really important for us to kind of take some time for ourselves. You're the second person here recently over the last couple of episodes that actually said, I take time for myself in the mornings. And that's really important. And I realize after hearing that's something that I neglect, other than going to the gym. I use the hour that I go to the gym in the evenings as my personal time to kind of release some of the stresses that I have to deal with or whatever. But I can also see where using that time in the morning could be helpful because you start off your day on a positive note.
Right. And me, like I say, I'm obviously a Christian man, but maybe that's not your faith, or maybe you have no faith. You can still start off with your favorite beverage, whatever that may be, and whatever positive you want to read. Maybe it's a book, or maybe it's something religious, or maybe it's not, but just something that's not the negative media. And Facebook, that's the worst thing to start your day off with.
It really
Facebook.
is. And, that becomes a habit. Something that we do is the first thing when we roll out of bed, we pick up the phone and look at Facebook, or if Facebook's not our thing, Instagram or whatever it is. And like you said, that's probably not the best habit to form.
Right.
So tell us about a challenging time or situation that you or your company faced concerning training, but you persisted. made the tough decisions. And now that once painful memory serves as an invaluable learning experience.
Yeah, so I've got one that I've overcome, and I've got one that I'm still kind of in. One that I've overcome is, of course, we're a training academy, like I said, but we are have a podcast for the last 4 years. But the podcast was becoming difficult, and it was one of those situations where I thought I would go ahead and retire the podcast. There's a lot of training episodes. There's over 200 episodes, and I thought that's enough training. We started it for good reason, but now we fill it in other areas, and some things changed. Some people had contacted me and wanted to help and wanted to be involved in maybe being a podcast producer and help me find guests and things like that. Made the decision to go ahead and try that, and it has been fantastic. It is keeping the podcast on the air. It's still very busy, but that has helped immensely. And because I left my mind open to what they were saying, and I said, well, let's try it. And now the podcast is continuing on and doing well. And one that I'm in the middle of now, and I know that's two of them, but one I'm in the middle of is, so in the state that I'm in, and in most states now, online training is acceptable for police training. Okay, fantastic. And a large part of my company is online training, so I love online training. However, it has gotten to the point now where a lot of budgets, police department budgets and things like that, are loving online training because it's overall cheaper. But you and I both know, you've been at business a long time, so have I. You and I both know you cannot replace classroom training for benefit.
Very true.
Some things classroom training, obviously you can't train online, but even things you could train online, classroom means a lot, because not only do other people ask questions, you make contacts, make friends, make networks. That's what's built law enforcement. So the problem in right now is some of our classroom classes, we're not filling them as fast as we used to, because you can get some class online. Or even if it's not the same thing, you've got these companies out there that are offering bulk packages, cheap online training, but it's repetitive. It's the same thing you took 3 years ago, last year, next year, and there's no real training to it, but it looks nice on the budget. So training company, we're fighting that, saying, look, I believe in online training. I'm not saying no, but what are you doing to your officers when they have the same free courses every year for 5 years?
That is a huge problem in law enforcement today. It really is. And, that's really why I developed the company that I have, Thin Blue Learn. Our system is online, and I agree with you when you talk about, there's a value that you get by actually being in a classroom with other students where you could interact and stuff like that. But that's what made me start thinking about how online training is used in law enforcement, because there's so many different ways that we can use it that would actually help officers learn and retain that information. Just watching a video for 30 minutes or an hour or whatever is not training. It's watching a video. If there's no interaction, if there's no doing or anything like that, it's very unlikely that officer is going to learn anything. And that's what I did when I tried to structure my company to learn how to use the online system in a way that challenges the officers and that they retain that information that they're hopefully learning in that training session by actually having them do some things while they're in the class. It's not watching a series of videos or whatever. So, man, I'm glad you said that, because that's really powerful stuff. I understand the value of being in the classroom and having that interaction.
Right. And, if I can add to that just for a second, you're probably been in long enough. Do you remember, and I think it was called Street Survival, I'm not sure, but back in the day we had VCR tapes, and we would go into a briefing, and the stars were on a VCR tape. It'd be 15 minutes worth of something. And hey, that's what we're doing today. But and online training has its place. I'm not against online training. Obviously, that's the bulk of our company. But we all, like I said, we have a lot of classroom short courses as well. But here's what online training, here's the negative part of it. There is a few companies out there, and remain nameless, but they have these programs that they have sold to states, and they say, okay, how many officers do you have? X number of dollars per officer per year, and they get all the access to this training. most of the training has not been updated, and we can speak about integrity, and I don't want to, but here's some what I have found out from other officers in multiple states.